This video contains massive spoilers for In Golden Flame. If you're planning on playing in this adventure, do not watch any further. Mission 3. To the Dome. Briefing. Jerry and Elske are in agreement. Roderick Steele must be stopped. The best place to start is Furnace City. They'll have a better idea of what's happening on Asphodel and where to find help. Goal: travel to Furnace City. Navigate the wilderness of Asphodel. Rescue abducted Calliopeans. Wreck the arena. Send Roderick Steele a clear message. The lives of Calliope's people are not his playthings. Stakes: a lot of people will be forced to kill each other for sport if they aren't rescued, and Steele will be further emboldened to exploit Calliope. Reward: Mistress Elske will provide the team with enough funds to advance to license level 3. She's also promised to upgrade the Dragon's Tooth. Reserves: the PCs have access to any reserves they acquired from the last 2 missions, or on downtime activities along with them, so long as it makes narrative sense for them to be available on Asphodel. Clocks: actions taken during mission may affect the station's stability and cult influence clocks. At the start of the mission, tick a segment on the cult influence clock. The cult's presence is insidious, and while everyone's eyes are upon Asphodel, its agents have more leeway to operate on Hell's Gate. Beat 16, Walk and Talk. Buddy, page 167. Establishes the journey progress and enemy attention clocks, which are relevant throughout this mission but will be erased after its completion. Mission structure. This mission starts with the team gathering aid and supplies in Furnace City during Beat 15, the only city, page 157, and Beat 16, Walk and Talk Buddy, page 167. Once this task is complete, they will journey through the wilderness in Beat 17, Unforgiving Terrain, page 173, which is subdivided into a series of encounters, which are chosen by the players. These encounters will give the team more chances to gather help and supplies. Finally, in Beat 18, the Battle Royale, page 188. They will assault the Steel Dome, rescue the abductees, and escape after trashing the place. Beat 15. The only city. The journey to Asphodel will take about 5 days. Jerry sends a freighter along with the fire team to give them some sort of excuse as to why they're out there. The curve of Asphodel slowly begins to flatten as you drop into the atmosphere, your vessel's hull glowing cherry red with re-entry heat. Gravity begins tugging on you, real gravity, not spin or thrust. They say Asphodel was colder once, that it even had polar ice caps. But those days are long past now. A vast ocean dominates the North Pole. As the ice melted and the waters pressed south, they left sharp, craggy mountains with deep valleys carved by meltwater, worn down over time by eons of wind and rain. But the highlands still provide shelter from the worst of the elements, and so that's where they built Furnace City. Driving rain batters the tooth's hull plating, and the ship judders as it passes through layer after layer of cloud. Through the haze of the rainstorm, a flash of lightning illuminates a glass dome surrounded by kilometers of industrial sprawl. There it is, the only terrestrial city in the long rim. Siren's voice cuts in over the roar of the atmospheric engines. Pillar control, this is Harvest Gold 0451. Alongside Harvest Gold 09er47 Heavy, requesting landing clearance and approach vector for both vessels, over. Harvest Gold 0451, this is Pillar Control. You are on the list and clear for Pad 3. Please descend to flight level 1600 and turn right, heading 310. Harvest Gold 09er47 Heavy, you'll be landing at Pad 18. Maintain current heading and await further instructions. Welcome to Furnace City. City layout. Furnace City is enclosed in a dome 3 kilometers in diameter at its widest point. It reaches a height of 1,100 meters above the surrounding terrain, with a central support column known as the pillar that rises an additional 50 meters further than the crown of the dome. The dome encloses a steep, V-shaped depression roughly 3 times as deep as the dome is tall. The city itself is built in a series of 3 major tiers stacked on top of one another that descend downwards, with the pillar at the center. The top tier, known as the rings, contains the vast majority of the city's living space. It's a series of stepped, concentric rings following the slope of the crater, connected by a series of funiculars. There are few freestanding structures. Residential, commercial, and municipal spaces are built into the crater walls. At the bottom of the rings, built on the roof of the second tier, there is a large, flat green space around the pillar dedicated mostly to leisure, with some scattered agricultural elements. The middle tier, known as the farms, is a series of vertically stacked agricultural installations, which provide Furnace City with food. The city's sewage and water processing systems are also located on this tier. The lowest tier, known as the sump, is a mostly abandoned area full of equipment used during the city's early days. A couple of the lowest sub-basements flooded at the turn of the century and were sealed off. The pillar contains most of the city's communications infrastructure, most notably its local OmniNode, in addition to its air traffic control center. It also contains the primary freight elevators that move equipment and produce between the farms and the rings, and if necessary, mothballed gear from the sum page outside the dome is a sprawling industrial complex known as the burn fields, linked to the city proper by a tangle of monorail lines. The burn fields contain a stable reactor plant that provides power at night or during periods of heavy load, and a second stable reactor plant dedicated entirely to the orbital accelerator. The orbital accelerator is a gigantic mass driver track that extends nearly 400 kilometers east of the city, intended to propel spacecraft to a high enough altitude to safely fire their torch drives. Crewed vessels have to ride at a lower G-force, so usually can't get all the way to the edge of the atmosphere from the mass driver alone, but uncrewed cargo drones can. Beyond the burn fields, but within the perimeter of its air defense network, there are several landing pads for visiting ships. Due to the fumes from the city's industrial sector, the solar collectors have to be placed even further away from the city, outside the air cordon. Locations: City Hall. Located in one of the middle rings, the assembly meets here every 2 local days to discuss pressing issues. All sessions are open to residents for comments, questions, and suggestions, except during a state of high emergency. Elections are held every local year, with assembly representatives maintaining a ratio of roughly 1 for each 10,000 residents. Ratios: Golden Scrap and Salvage. The largest scrap and salvage dealership in the city, run by the friendly and eccentric Ratio Salvager. A full third of the planet's cast-off technology winds up here. Electronic or mechanical things too beat up, worn out or broken down to be fixed, from dilapidated rovers to old slates, from junked mechs to obsolete spaceship components. You can probably find it in Ratio's yard. The Rusty Nail. With 3 million citizens, there's no shortage of bars, pubs, taverns, and watering holes in Furnace City, but the Rusty Nail has a particular reputation. It's where the forgers hang out. Notable features include a memorial wall for all the folks killed in the strikebreak of Ofar, a dartboard in the shape of Roderick Steele's face, and the Hall of Fame, framed photographs of the 6 people who've managed to outdrink the blacksmith. Sulfur Market. Trade between Outlanders and city folk happens all over Furnace City, but the lion's share of it takes place in the Sulfur Market, a satellite dome in the outer burn fields. Most of the major roads that lead in and out of the municipality converge here, allowing trader caravans easy access. The whole thing is run by a council staffed equally by city folk and Outlanders, and because of the latent distrust between the 2 groups, they're often called in to arbitrate disputes between traders. Pillar Park. The lowest, centermost tier of the rings, immediately surrounding the pillar itself, is taken up by a large municipal park. It's nothing compared to the sprawling city parks and nature reserves of Union's core worlds. But it represents a dream that, despite their differences, the city folk and the Outlanders share: trees, blooming in the soil of Asphodel. The Pink Flamingo, a popular bar on the upper rings. Its name is based on an old legend in which an early colonist claimed to have seen a flamingo while out in the Terra Solis. Such a thing would, of course, be impossible. No macroscopic cradle species can survive Asphodel's atmosphere. The bar is most well known for its flamingo cocktails, equal parts white rum and gin, with a dash of bitters, and its psychological horror rewatch marathons. Persons of interest: Kanan Zhao. They, them. Temporary overseer. Furnace City's municipal assembly is officially a non-hierarchical council of civilian representatives. During important initiatives, however, it becomes useful to appoint an overseer, an individual with strictly defined powers whose job is to ensure that the assembly's decisions are implemented. The current overseer is Kanan Zhao, a veteran emergency planning specialist appointed to handle the abduction crisis. As this initiative relates to the city's security, Kanan may request the militia detain or remove people actively endangering the city. However, it's important to note that they aren't in the militia and aren't part of its command structure. They are simply authorized to bring issues to the attention of the militia without consulting the assembly first. Like most landborn, Kanan is tall and lanky, and usually ties their hair back in a ponytail. They're fond of denim jackets and cargo trousers, each with enough pockets to hold all of their pens, slates, and notepads. They're normally a lot friendlier, but they haven't gotten much sleep lately. Their attitude towards the PCs will depend on how well things went on the icebreaker. When not on the clock, Kanan is an avid gravball enthusiast, plays a pretty mean game of bridge, and restores old ground vehicles, mostly just for the love of the practice, but also to donate to Outlander communities who need transportation. Clip Magazine. He, him. Militia Quartermaster. An Outlander who grew up living a hard-scrabble life outside the dome. Clip left the planet as soon as he could. He spent much of his adult life in the Icebreaker's mech arenas, where his gruff persona, tireless endurance, and pragmatic fighting style made him a hit with the fans. However, a close brush with death during a match left him changed, and he returned to Asphodel only to find the community he'd grown up in had disbanded. With nowhere to go, he took up work in the city militia, where his talent for keeping mechs running in any climate and through any amount of abuse made him indispensable. Clip's shorter and bulkier than most landborn, the result of spending his early years in stronger gravity. He still has all his hair, but despite the fact that he's not that old, its color has faded to a dirty steel gray, and he buzzes it so square you could balance a beer glass on it. His right leg is gone, lost in the accident that nearly took his life, and he has a replacement that he built himself, having gotten tired of all the fiddly shit on the SC prosthetic he was given. He also has prosthetic replacements for 3 of the fingers on his right hand, lost in a munitions incident a few years back, which he also built himself. He's likely sympathetic to the PC's mission. After all, it was Outlander communities who suffered abductions first. He might even try to slip the team something under the table, if he feels like they're good at their jobs. Anastasia Shawn. She, her. Spacecraft technician. When something's going wrong with the city's fleet of spacecraft, more often than not, someone asks Anna Shawn about it. More often than not, she has the answer. It's not that she's the most senior engineer in the city. Many engineers have decades or even a century of experience on her. It's not that she works harder than anyone else. Every wrenchy in Furnace City pulls their weight. It's not some mystic superpower. This is the result of a lifetime of work and keen observation. She's been around spaceships since she could walk, and she knows what it looks and sounds like when they fail. Anna doesn't speak, communicating exclusively in Calliopean Sign Language. In the rare instances where nobody around her can sign, she will write on a slate. She's extremely friendly, always happy to converse with people about their day, and she'll eagerly explain her profession to those who ask. The Sean family are all followers of the faith of the One, but unbeknownst to Anastasia, her mother, father, and sister are also members of the inner cult. Her father is an aerospace traffic controller, and his primary job is falsifying records, tweaking launch weights, changing transponder codes, reassigning landing pads, and so on to allow the cult to move personnel or equipment in and out of the city undetected. Ratio salvager. They, them. Genuinely honest scrap trader. Ratio salvagers showed up in Calliope nearly a decade ago. After a year or so bouncing around various ports of call, they finally settled in Furnace City and took a job as a scrap and salvage dealer. They're the owner and proprietor of Ratio's Golden Salvage and Scrap Yard, the largest in Furnace City. They're short, even for an off-worlder, and they wear a proso collar at all times, not to disguise themselves as someone else, merely to hide their facial features. If asked about it, they admit that they'd prefer not to be identified by their true face, not unheard of for someone who's emigrated to the long rim. They're friendly and conversational, with a quick wit, a masterful command of mathematics, a broad general knowledge, and a love of esoteric humor. They're well thought of around the city, although people do find it odd how rarely they try to fast talk or haggle. Sitting not far from Ratio's office is an old, beaten-up SSC swallowtail that's had so many of its original parts replaced with off-brand, it'd give a member of SSC Visual a heart attack. There's a name written in elegant cursive on the side, a causal trade war. Ratio has a secret. They're actually Basil, 37-6 Theta, a clone of the late Basil Aniline 36, previous patriarch of the Karakin Minor House Aniline, making Ratio one of two remaining heirs and the crux of a succession crisis. This would be a problem if he wasn't in Calliope. Honestly, who's going to come looking for him out here? Basil's preferred pronouns were he/him, but Ratio goes by they/them to obfuscate their identity. The blacksmith. He/him. Speaker for the forge. Not many people know the blacksmith's old name, and he's stated on many occasions that the man he was dyed with the other Unionists on Impact Plaza. From what's known of his past, he wasn't a major player in Calliope's organized labor scene before the Strike of 4, but witnessing the brutality of the strike break changed something in him. The blacksmith is known across the system for his honesty and plain dealing. If he says something, you can rely on it to be true, and if he gives his word that something will be done, then by all the virtues, come fire, flood, or famine, that thing will be done. Such is the strength of his reputation that, as the blacksmith said, it has entered the Calliopean vernacular as a phrase equivalent to "I swear this is true." But there's another side to the blacksmith's reputation. So long as it achieves his end goals, nothing is off the table. Even his most generous supporters would call him a radical, but extremist is a more accurate term. He would argue, and not without merit, that more often than not, extreme measures are what gets the job done. The extreme actions of impact dynamics, so says the blacksmith, warrant an extreme response. When he's not fomenting unrest among the proletariat, the blacksmith can most often be found working at his namesake profession. With widespread automated manufacture and printers, the need for blacksmithing has largely disappeared, but he continues to practice the art, both for its own sake and as a method of self-discipline. Swords are a particular favorite of his. Additional NPCs. Furnace City is full of interesting people. In fact, as the only planetary city in the Long Rim, almost nobody in it is uninteresting. Anshar Zevi, the city's chief environmental impact analyst. His job is to ensure the city's industry doesn't poison the region's water table, at least more than it already has. Zevi has a problem, though. He's been on the take from the circuit for years, feeding them data on the city's security patrols. But now, one of those patrols has been abducted. He's pretty sure it's a horrible coincidence, but who's going to believe him if he gets found out? To make matters even worse, the circuit hasn't been returning his calls. Per Dust Bradford, a broad-shouldered, muscular man who's never seen without his duster jacket. Apparently, he's a bounty hunter who came here chasing someone but gave up when he got to Calliope and realized that anyone who'd run there had enough trouble as it was. Nowadays, he puts his skills to use as a sort of unofficial community justice officer. Mechanic Temporary, a young truck mechanic who just reached adulthood and is currently looking for a permanent name. Nothing's stuck yet. If they get a chance to talk to the PCs, they'll ask for their favorite words to see if any catch their imagination. In their spare time, they're reasonably talented with a saxophone. Dowles de Kalb. Dowles de Kalb is Impact Dynamics corporate liaison in Furnace City, and was quite probably the city's most hated person even before the abduction started. But it's not her fault she's in massive birth debt to Impact Dynamics, and her family's still on the plaza, so she can't quit or the debt will be passed on to them. Dowles can't risk contacting the PCs publicly, but she will anonymously pass on information to any scheme that will weaken Roderick Steele's position. TG and Ezra, two professional gravball players who are never seen apart. It's the off-season right now, so they're visiting home. They're arrogant and sports-obsessed, but also kind, generous, and dependable when the chips are down. Currently, they're training even harder than usual due to the fact that there's less gravity on the planet than on most orbital habitats, so they can often be found jogging around the rings during one of their long cardio routines. Everyone suspects they're an item. Esme, DJ EZ McPherson. By day, she's an odd job girl. She doesn't talk about that much. By night, she's a DJ, and she talks about that a lot. If you need someone for a party, she's the girl to call. If you can pay her travel costs, she can get out to anywhere in the system. If you can't, she can still run the decks remotely. Ipswich DeLisi hires her for their annual VR fundraiser raves. And this year, they've told her to go all out and blow the roof off. So she's currently looking for new sounds, samples, and musical inspiration. Calix, a short, excitable man, easily recognizable by the tessellating hexagon livery on his custom hard suit. Calix runs a makerspace, a place where anyone can come to learn how to make things, share their knowledge, or just borrow some tools. Pencil's Multitude, a Sidiver obsessed with finding the Persimmon, a first-wave colony ship. Most of the Persimmon's colonists ended up settling in Furnace City. It was left in orbit of Asphodel for a few years, but just after efforts to tow Endymion's Lament into Zahak's orbit began, the ship disappeared from the historical record, along with a skeleton crew of roughly 50 people assigned to maintain it. Isabel Ashworth, a mousy, anxiety-ridden woman who makes her living as an expert gunsmith. This is an odd choice for someone who professes to be a strict pacifist, but nobody questions the quality of her work. She bears a faint, curved scar across the bridge of her nose, which she claims was earned while doing something heroic, but lines up suspiciously well with the rims of her safety goggles. Zephyr, Zeph for short, is a Zephyrus-class agricultural services NHP who is employed by the city to manage its farms and green spaces. In their spare time, Zephyr has a passion for designing custom subaltern chassis for other NHPs and seems to add a new feature to their own almost every week. They're also infamous for being one of only 2 people in the system who can beat Siren and FleetCom when they disable their limiters. Daily life. Life in Furnace City is, for the most part, like life in any other city. You have an apartment, you likely have a job, which you turn up for in the morning, and once that's done, you hit the bars or the restaurants. The only real difference is that the sky is a glass ceiling, keeping a toxic hellstorm from devouring you. Furnace City is a major industrial center. If there are refining or manufacturing processes that need to be performed planetside, fully 90% of them take place here, and most of the other 10% is subcontractors working for the city. The vast majority of the city's non-operational jobs are in its industrial sector. Furnace City possesses 2 Schedule II printers and 1 Schedule III printer, equipment from the original colony vessels, sent during the first wave when the system's planets were thought to be much more inhabitable. Furnace City is thus one of 3 places in Calliope where a Schedule III printer is available, and it has the most reasonable price for its use, although it's by no means cheap. Most jobs outside the refining or manufacturing sectors are operational, that is, related to the city's continued functioning. By far the largest proportion of operational jobs are in agriculture. The city has 3 million mouths to feed, after all. Maintenance and construction are the next largest sectors, followed by service staff. Like many frontier colonies, the local currency of Furnace City is requisition. The Assembly tries to ensure every citizen lives comfortably, depending on current events, that sometimes has to be downgraded to merely lives. Technically, Outlanders are also entitled to a basic stipend of requisition, but many among both the city folk and Outlanders look down on those who suckle the city's teat. Also, like many frontier colonies, there's a thriving barter system for goods and services, either not covered or forbidden under the requisition system. Walk through the burn fields at night, and you'll run into at least 1 or 2 gray or black market deals in progress. Time on Asphodel doesn't follow cradle standard measurements. An Asphodelian day is 36 hours long, and other time measurements are based on its 2 moons. The closer, smaller Orpheus orbits once every 8 Asphodelian days, and an Orph is a unit roughly equivalent to a week. The larger, more distant Eurytus orbits in a 1 to 4 resonance with Orpheus, every 32 Asphodelian days, or 4 Orphs, comprising a Uri. A year, sometimes an asp, is almost exactly 6 Uris, or 192 Asphodelian days. Scenes from the city. A loud chime reverberates from the pillar, signaling a public service announcement. Rain acidity is unusually high today, so double-check all suit seals. 2 stevedores sit atop their loading rigs, drinking coffee and chatting as their mechs plod along on autopilot. There's a large queue forming at one of the funiculars, because someone got throw-up drunk in the cabin and it's currently being cleaned. When it turns out that someone means the funicular safety inspector, the queue thins out significantly. A crowd has gathered in a pop-up protest against impact dynamics. This one isn't even related to the abductions. The people around here have a wealth of objections to the company's business practices. A gaggle of youths are busy working on a graffiti mural. It speaks of their hopes for the future. A prominent hope seems to involve Roderick Steele getting punched in the groin by Xiong Exiaoli. A group of Outlanders, easily identifiable by the fact that they're wearing hard suits indoors, are pinning pictures of several people from their community to a large board full of those who've gone missing recently. They've likely been abducted. A recruiter for a factory workers' union distributes literature. He has a flaming anvil tattooed on the back of his hand. There's an earth-shaking rumble and a noise like the world's largest camera flash as the orbital accelerator fires, shooting a ship all the way into the mesosphere. A representative from the city assembly is surrounded by concerned citizens and is struggling to work out an adequate reply. A group of school children is being run through a breach drill, what to do in the event that the dome has a structural failure and the external atmosphere gets in. There seems to be a greater sense of urgency than would fit a routine drill. Outlanders. A sizable minority of Asphodel's population lives outside Furnace City, in communities ranging in size from a handful of families to thousands of people. Some are nomadic, while others maintain permanent settlements. Not all communities live permanently outside Furnace City. Some will travel to the city during the summer months to escape the heat. While individual communities differ, the uniting cultural element of Outlander society is a dedication to building habitable worlds. The first colonists came here based on the promise of paradise worlds. The Outlanders are their descendants, and since the corporations have all but abandoned Calliope, they feel a responsibility to ensure that this promise is fulfilled by someone. It's often said nobody in the system knows more about terraforming than Outlanders do, and with good reason. Outlanders divide territory outside the city, Terra Solis, the lonely land, into a complex system of claims, based on what resources it contains and the needs of a region's communities. They can be as small as a couple of acres to as large as thousands of square kilometers. A community might hold only a single claim, or several, or even none, if they're very unlucky. Claim-holding communities often allow others access to their claims on a limited basis. For example, most permanent settlements allow nomad communities passage through their claims, though this isn't universal. Some allow others to mine, forage, or even build on their claims in return for some form of payment. No central authority exists to recognize and enforce claims, although coalitions of communities will usually take this role for a local region. Traditionally, disputes are resolved at a meeting adjudicated by a third party on neutral ground, though the exact format differs. Furnace City tends not to interfere in Outlander disputes unless specifically asked. The city is on good terms with most communities and doesn't want to risk it by earning a reputation for meddling. Life in the Terra Solis is harsh. Every resource must be strictly conserved: food, potable water, even breathable air. Outside the dome, temperatures can spike as high as 70 degrees Celsius, 158 degrees Fahrenheit, in the summer months. Air pressure is twice that of Cradle. The atmosphere lacks free oxygen and contains dangerous levels of sulfur and nitrogen dioxides. Outlanders rarely remove their hard suits, even within their own dwellings. Trade between the Outlanders and the city largely consists of raw materials for finished products. Most communities don't have the facilities for fabrication at scale, and so far as the city knows, at least, no Outlander owns a printer. There's also extensive trade between communities, facilitated in large part by the nomads. Some nomad communities make a living entirely by carrying trade goods between settlements. Most communities are cautious of newcomers, especially those who aren't Outlanders themselves, but will quickly warm to those who show respect. Outlander opinions vary widely. Many Outlanders don't trust city folk at all, but are perfectly happy with off-worlders. There are several recluse communities that don't trust anyone at all, even other Outlanders. Permanent settlements are usually small clusters of prefab buildings, often older models brought with the first two waves of colony ships, and then mothballed. The rain constantly churns the soil to mud, so most settlements tend to be built in areas where the ground is more solid. Power is usually provided by a combination of wind and solar collectors, although a coalition of larger communities might share the cost and labor of running a stable reactor. By long-standing tradition, settlement communities usually have a two-word name, with a proper noun and a descriptor: Nicoboro Refuge, Walhazy Enclave, Antwa Town, and so forth. The origin of this practice has been lost to time. There are exceptions to it, but other Outlanders consider it odd. Nomad communities consist of convoys of vehicles, supply crawlers, trucks, trailers, mobile habitats, mechs, whatever can carry the people, their belongings, and their homes. It's usually easy to tell how a nomad community makes its living. You'll see the gear slung on the sides of trucks and carried by their mechs. Nomad communities have a lot more variation in their names. If it's a family or a clan, it will usually take their name. If the community is based around a particular job, the name might reference it. If it has a regular route, it may name itself after that route, or after a geographical feature on it. If it's just a broad alliance of people, the name can be almost anything. The exact number of Outlanders is unclear. Common wisdom puts it at about 10% of the planet's population, which would put their numbers at somewhere around 300,000. But this figure is back of a napkin guesswork. The Burning Forge. The Burning Forge is the youngest of Calliope's major pirate bands, founded only 12 years ago. Despite their relative youth, they've carved out a territory that encompasses much of the inner system. The story of their founding is a tragedy that should have been a triumph. It starts with the first organized labor action in Impact Plaza's history. Working conditions on Impact Plaza had been awful for a century, but the final straw came in 5004 U, when Impact Dynamics ceased hardship payments for injured workers. 80% of the station's workforce voted to unionize, and the new union's first action was to declare a general strike. Impact Dynamics was completely unprepared to deal with industrial action on this scale. Its first response was to attempt to smear the union on the Muse, trying to paint the agricultural strike as a dangerous act that was starving the system. Calliope, however, was delighted to see ID's workers rise up against it, and the union immediately received a flood of donations. The next response was to deploy the station's internal security force, but this tactic failed on 2 counts. Firstly, ID's security officers were poorly trained and outnumbered, nearly 15-1. Many engagements ended in a rout, leaving military-grade weapons and equipment in the hands of the strikers. Secondly, after the first few defeats, many in the force realized they weren't being paid much better than the workers, and crossed picket lines to join the strike. Driven to desperation, Impact Dynamics bargained with the devil himself, Andros Capella. The Hellhounds arrived on Impact Dynamics a week later, and the strike was broken in just 4 days. The brutality of the Hounds defies adequate description. Mechanized chassis were deployed against massed crowds. Leadership figures in the Union were executed in public, alongside their families. Incendiary weapons were used against unarmored civilians. At the height of the carnage, a brave, anonymous photographer snapped the defining image by which Calliope remembers the strike break of 4. A crowd of civilians fleeing in terror as Andros Capella himself strides forward, Krakatoa thermobaric flamethrower, licking at their back ranks. The cockpit of his Genghis opened so he could witness his work with his own eyes. Horrified by the unrestrained violence, the majority of the union surrendered. Most of the workers accepted collective punishment and returned to work, while the rest of the union fled Impact Plaza and regrouped in Furnace City, or the orbits of Asphodel's moons. It was at this point that a new voice arose, the blacksmith. He harnessed the fury and sorrow amongst the workers who'd witnessed the carnage unleashed against people engaged in peaceful industrial action, and proposed a radical new creed. They had tried being reasonable. Now was the time to get unreasonable. With startling speed, the blacksmith turned a peaceful union of workers into a group of radical insurgents. Old Impact Dynamics stockpiles were raided. Loader pilots started retraining for military chassis. Sympathetic moonlighters were recruited to bolster numbers. The Burning Forge have 3 stated long-term goals. Destroy the Hellhounds, tear down Impact Dynamics, and seize control of Impact Plaza for the people. These aims have made them pretty popular with the average Calliopean, as does their habit of leaving system residents alone. The vast majority of the Forge's piracy targets traffic from out of system, with an obvious preference for shipments to Impact Dynamics. Nonetheless, civilian opinion of the Forge isn't totally positive. A lot of labor organizers see the Forge as a terrorist group that gives legitimate unions a bad name. Additionally, while they're leagues better than the Hellhounds or the Circuit, the Forge doesn't entirely refrain from preying on Calliopeans. It's mostly the rich. More than one member of the board of Icebreaker has been subject to a shakedown, but a few civilian shipments get knocked over here and there. The most common critique of the Forge, however, is also the most personal, that it's just a vehicle for the blacksmith's personal revenge. A lot of people who dislike the Forge cite the many opportunities the Forge has had to do genuine good for the system, but didn't take because they would involve unglamorous hard work, or wouldn't hurt enough bad people, or just wouldn't make the blacksmith the hero of the story. One of the system's worst-kept secrets is that the Forge are headquartered in the Burnfields, just outside the dome of Furnace City. The city quietly tolerates their presence in return for the assurance that no shipping vessel belonging to or doing business with the city is ever targeted by the Forge, an arrangement that the blacksmith is more than happy to abide by. Since the implosion of the Hellhounds, the Forge is the largest pirate organization in Calliope and has been making moves to expand into the outer system. Nonetheless, these efforts are hampered somewhat by the blacksmith's ardent refusal to accept any defector from the Hellhounds, nor any moonlighter known to have worked with them. The burning Forge's symbol is a stylized depiction of an anvil, bursting into flame. Fully initiated members tend to have it tattooed on the back of their left hand.